This is Digital Voices with Beau Tiffany, inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story, exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Beau Tiffany.
Welcome back to Digital Voices, guys. In the heartland of America, nestled between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River, lies a place where myth and reality coexist in harmony. That's Wisconsin. Often recognized for its dairy farms, sprawling forests, and warm Midwestern hospitality, there's a lesser-known side of the state that captures the imagination and stirs the spirit of adventure. Beneath the tranquil surface of this picturesque landscape, Wisconsin conceals a rich tapestry of captivating tales of mysterious creatures, each woven into the cultural fabric of the state over the centuries. These mystical beasts, or cryptids, as they're known amongst the realm of cryptozoology, inhabit the mist-shrouded forests, the dark recesses of the lakes, and the most secluded quarters of the imagination. From the beast of Bray to the Hodag, the Wisconsin Werewolf to the lake monsters of Wisconsin, each tale brings with it a sense of awe and a touch of fear, leaving an indelible mark on the folklore of the state. As we invite Connor Quinnigan into the show, he's bringing us some tales from the southwestern side of our nation. Connor, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, Beau, man, it's great to talk with you again. It just seems like yesterday or so we were talking, but our time always flies by, and I enjoy doing it. And today we get to talk about such a unique subject.
When we left off on that last cast, we were talking about cryptids, UAPs, and wow, this would be a great way for us to share some of our own stories that we grew up with. Yeah. Especially, you grew up in a New Mexico area, which is known for a ton of cryptids. Everything from the Chupacabra to UAPs and Skinwalker Ranch, I believe, is out that way. It's pretty amazing. What kind of stuff do you hear about?
A lot of stuff, exactly like you're talking about. I think for a lot of people, when they think of New Mexico, one of the first things that comes to mind is Roswell and the infamous UFO. Mm-hmm. But there are so many other stories also involving UAPs or UFOs, but also cryptids like the Chupacabra and some other stuff that we'll probably get into later on this hour. I remember as a younger person hearing about the Chupacabra and just filled with fear. New Mexico is unique because we have the Navajo Reservation. It's one of the largest Native American Indian reservations in the United States. And it expands out into Arizona. It's just absolutely huge. So that Four Corners area of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado, those, it seems like it's like a breeding ground of cryptozoology of all kinds of fascinating stories, including a Sasquatch. You and I talked about, I think pretty much every region has their version of Sasquatch or have seen it.
Almost like it migrates when we're not looking.
It does. Right. But something that's really unique, it seems, out there is this Chupacabra.
Yeah. It's just, what is the Chupacabra?
It's probably about the size of a coyote or a fox, not a little larger than that, maybe a large dog. And the word Chupacabra, it's Spanish, and basically it means goat sucker, because what these things do is they come across animals like chickens and cows and goats herds, and they get a hold of the animal on the neck like a vampire, and they drain it of all of its blood. They suck its blood out. And the next morning, the farmers and the officials, they find the dead carcasses of the animals and can't explain what had happened. And amazing. So I remember as a kid that all these stories they're often told around campfire, usually when you're out and about, when it could happen to you. But we had friends, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and these kind of events would happen where the only thing that they could explain it was a Chupacabra, because part of the mythology, if you say, or the description of them, is that they're extremely fast. Plus they look reptilian or maybe alien-like features, so that they have glowing red eyes, and they're extremely fast, and they can basically jump to areas, just huge, long distances. They can take out a whole herd in an evening. We're talking dozens and dozens of cattle. And for a lot of these people in the villages in the area, that might be their complete total livelihood, their annual income and even their food source. So
there's no blood around on the ground anywhere.
No, and there's just nothing to explain it.
The amazing thing is a cow, I'm from the dairy state, has got 6 to 8 gallons of blood in it. So for a herd of cows to be drained,
right?
Wow, yeah,
it's just absolutely stunning that this happens. And so in this era of everybody has a camera on them with their phone, and of course we all have different security cameras and stuff. Yeah. We haven't yet seen one or captured one, as far as I know, on video, but I'm sure that's coming. It's just like the infamous picture of Bigfoot that we caught a picture of her up in California years and years ago, like in the late 60s, which kind of spurred on the whole Bigfoot thing.
Yeah.
But this Chupacabra, even though they say, if you look up the history, that it comes from Puerto Rico and that they think that it really took hold in the United States in the 90s. But I remember being a kid, I would say in the late 70s and 80s, hearing about these types of events. Maybe I'm mistaking how slippery memory can be at times, but it seems like we were hearing about that in our area before the 90s, but maybe I'm wrong. But however you slice it, it's scary as heck. Anything that could have that type of prowess and be basically can prey upon large animals, like you're saying, cattle, and not leave any blood.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh my God, what kind of killer is this? It's just absolutely.
Well, definitely one with OCD, because they don't even leave a drop eye. Another thing I hear about out there is the cattle mutilations, and the cuts that they find on the cattle.
Yeah,
it seems to be like some kind of surgical scalpel or something even finer.
Oh, yeah, very precise.
It also cauterizes at the same time as it cuts. That's definitely not a Chupacabra kind of thing.
Yeah, that seems like you're saying. So I don't know if these are related to alien technology or UAPs, but
they're probably hungry too, and everybody likes a little beef.
Beef, it's what's for dinner. That was the campaign. Everybody, even an alien across the galaxy, loves her some beef, loves him some beef. But yeah, so I've often thought those must be related somehow. Maybe maybe one's an adult, one's a child. I don't know. It's bizarre.
Maybe the reason that you guys have so many sightings out that way is because that's where the ranch country is. Most of our beef comes from that direction. So,
it's true. And there's literally out towards Monument Valley, you could walk, I don't know, you could walk hours probably and never see another human being. If you're out on the Navajo reservation, it's very few and far. It's hardly populated at all. And so it leaves everything wide open for those stories to come to fruition. And maybe the powers that be know this, that whatever activity is not going to be as widely seen as if it took place in New York City. But then again, New York City, it's not going to have a herd of cattle. Maybe north of there as we go north of Manhattan and stuff. But yeah, definitely not in large cities.
It's interesting. So we do not have a Chupacabra, but Wisconsin has a werewolf.
What? I didn't know that. Really? So
I thought it was just in the movies. But back in 1936, picture this: at the vast unspoiled wilderness near the Wisconsin River was a place where a man and a native lived side by side, and sometimes where the lines blurred. There was a gentleman named Mark Shackleman, who was a common man accustomed to the quiet solitude of the lands of Wisconsin at the time. Now, one evening, while walking alongside a secluded path, he found himself standing on the edge of the inexplicable. Bathed in the golden twilight, an imposing figure stood. It bore the characteristics of a man, yet the ragged fur, the piercing lupine eyes, and the snarling fangs were eerily reminiscent of a wolf, he said. The creature, standing tall on its hind legs, fumbled with a curved wooden tool as if trying to kindle a fire. Shackleman supposedly watched in stunned silence as the beast raised its head and let out a series of guttural sounds, primitive form of communication that sent chills down his spine, he said. The creature then slowly receded into the thicket, leaving Shackleman with a tale that would add to the growing lore of the Wisconsin werewolf. Isn't that amazing?
That is, yeah. I had never heard a story. So when I think of Wisconsin, I'm not thinking of werewolves. That's just absolutely
I know.
Stunning. So had you heard about these when you were growing up?
So on the Wisconsin Werewolf, I had not heard that one before. I've heard the other ones that we'll share, but that one, when I was doing my research on the cryptids of Wisconsin, I hadn't heard of. And the fact that it goes back to 1936, I think is interesting because it wasn't inspired by Hollywood. It's the only thing that we really have in Wisconsin, especially back then, were wolves and bears and some mountain lion. That's about it. We definitely have rattlesnakes in certain parts, but other than that, other than the timber rattler, there's nothing else that's going to kill you.
Nothing like it. Yeah. Nothing quite like the werewolf. So yeah, you're right. So in the 30s, it couldn't have really been inspired. Off the top of my head, I can't remember when the Universal monsters come out, but it had to be probably before that came to national.
I'm thinking Depression era. There's some guy that hadn't shaved or showered and he's living off the land, and here's some guy strolls up and who's that?
Yeah. So the Wolfman, I want to say that wasn't until the 40s but you're absolutely right. And that's not to say that the legend or the myth of the Wolfman didn't exist. There's so many stories like these that are lycanthropous.
Yes.
The shape changing, shift changing of changing from a male or female, a man or woman, human into some kind of a creature.
It used to be shamans, right? Didn't shamans have that ability back in the day in certain Indian culture?
Yeah, we'll talk about a little bit later about skinwalkers. Yeah, is basically they were basically called witches that are pure evil. But it's just amazing how many how many stories there are of different types of lycanthropy. It's amazing. Yeah. It's just like the story of a great flood. No matter what religion, for the most part, it seems like they all are talking about a great flood.
Right. And there's usually an ounce of truth in every legend, right? And if you have so many sharing the same story, I definitely believe that there's that connection. Now, I think the way that they describe it is where sometimes we fall short. We lose sight of, through the details, how you going to explain a UFO to someone, especially if you don't have the words to explain that. How would you explain a lot of these things that they were seeing at the time? And especially in terms of flood or any kind of natural disaster, how else would you explain a volcano eruption?
This is true.
Yeah. There's a number of natural things that I think can influence culture, especially
like a shooting star or an asteroid, or
you hit it on the head. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things combined. Take a look at the stories of Jesus with the three wise men and the star in the sky that was guiding them. And every culture, every religion has its own little thing. That's why I love that we're doing this cryptid piece today, because every culture has its own thing. Well, let's get back to New Mexico. Another thing that I am aware of that you guys had was the Thunderbirds. Now, those obviously legendary creatures, they were rooted in Native American culture and history. Yep. What do you know about them?
Being from the Navajo reservation, there are incredible stories. So you have non-Native Americans with their stories about the Thunderbird, but some of the Native American friends of mine that I grew up with that are Navajo, they have incredible stories of sightings of the great Thunderbird. And some of these are just absolutely bizarre. They might be out wandering, picking berries or doing something, one of their chores, and there's a great shadow that comes over them, like when a cloud kind of flies over you. But the shadow just stays there, and you look up, and this winged creature with wings that some of them have described it from horizon to horizon, the size of the bird. It's just amazing. All these things. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like it's a very powerful, awe-inspiring figure that they associate with storms like thunder and just different natural forces of the sky. But it's not always necessarily a bad thing that I've heard, but it's just an amazing thing. So it has real cultural and spiritual significance for not just Navajo. We're talking about a lot of the Plains Native Americans. You can be up in the Great Lakes. There's been stories up there in Pacific Northwest. So it's not just unique to the Southwest. when you do go to the Southwest, anywhere like Taos or Santa Fe or Albuquerque or Farmington up Northwest, you see a lot of trading stores or stores themselves. They're named after the Thunderbird. And even in America, one of our great vehicles is called the T-Bird because of that. So the actual figure of the Thunderbird is actually a good sign. It's supposed to bring rain and good fortune. But however, it's the flip side. It's like in tarot. If you get the death card, it doesn't mean that you're going to die necessarily, but it can also mean that some things, bad or good, are coming to an end in your life and you're going to have new beginnings, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the Thunderbird kind of represents, is that it also, while it can be good fortune, rain and stuff for the soil, it can also be warnings of danger and even in some cases natural disaster. But Native Americans, they use it immensely in their art. Think back, my mom had a very beautiful turquoise necklace that a friend of ours who is a Native American artist, a silversmith, and he had made it out of turquoise and coral, and it was a large Thunderbird necklace. And I vividly remember that. And so you'll find it in a lot of their sand paintings. And of course, this is what I knew growing up on the Navajo reservation. I'm sure there's many other Native American traditions that I'm not familiar with. And then, like I say, the Pacific Northwest and other areas that also are familiar with the Thunderbird myth. I keep saying myth, but I want to keep an open mind because, what do we know?
What? And for the sake of purpose, just for open-mindedness, especially with the UAPs and UFOs, and that's been I don't know if this week has been a big week in Congress.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's basically, the tweets have been coming out. Congress is basically acknowledging pilots of UAPs that are of non-human origin. That's what one of the guys that was a former defense person, that's what he testified, is that some of these are biologically not human. They're from another world or whatever. It just blows my mind that my parents are long past, but if they were alive, they would not believe that these kind of things are being talked about in Congress. It's just amazing.
It really is. It's never in my lifetime would I have thought that we'd see this. And I think about the stories and how, again, those were interpreted by early people. And I could see some huge spaceship traveling through the air with some kind of lasers coming out of its eyes or whatever. And how that would be described by the native people.
Totally, completely. And if we go in the Southwest, there's a lot of, I don't know the correct term, but I must say picture, think that's basically drawings that are on caves or rocks. And a lot of those ones that are dating thousands of years old are depicting what it looks like to be is aliens or astronauts or rockets, that type of thing. And then we have in Egypt and some of the tombs, I've seen some of the writings or the drawings representing the same thing. It's just, what else would they be trying to visually describe to you? It looks like the way a child maybe would interpret what a rocket looks like, or maybe a man or woman flying in space.
Right.
And what else naturally that would have been available to them at that time? What else could it have been? I can't even imagine, other than the fact that they're using their imagination. But I don't think that's the case. It seems like most everything they wrote about was historical.
Exactly.
And telling the story of how we got to where we are now. But just a side note, one of the main attractions in Egypt is to go to see the Sphinx. But out of all of the Egyptian hieroglyphs and stuff, they don't talk about the Sphinx at all. So that would be, as I heard a guy saying the other day, that would be like talking about New York with not once mentioning the Statue of Liberty or Paris and the Eiffel Tower. He was saying that Sphinx is not from their culture. It had already pre-existed, because a lot of scientists are under the understanding that the Sphinx is thousands of years much older than the Egyptians, that it was there thousands of years before the Egyptians even arrived.
Right. They're talking, like 11, 12,000 years ago.
Absolutely.
During the last ice age. Something like that is when water last would have had its ability to create the erosion marks that you see within the enclosure, especially of the Sphinx, right?
Completely. And you're not seeing those same water erosion marks on the Great Pyramid of Giza or any of those type of things, but you are finding it on the Sphinx, and it's just amazing. Again, I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm just a dumb actor. All of this it just inspires all of us. I think it's absolutely fascinating and what a great time to be alive.
Oh yeah.
It's scary, but it's also exciting. It makes you want to hold your breath. Whatever is going to come out, it seems like we're on the cusp of finding out a lot of stuff, I think.
I agree. The thing that I do find is we tend to twist a lot of things to suit our belief systems. I don't want to make any enemies, but religion, and I'll take a look at Christianity. I have a lot of experience with it and I respect it. So any listeners, please don't hate me. But I do find that you start out with an idea and then you have some people that are like, I'm not 100% okay with that. So then they form another segment so then it becomes Catholic, and then you have Lutheran, and then and for a long time, homosexuality was outlawed in the church. And now you have churches that are accepting of that. Now the whole alien thing is going to come along, and watch, we're going to try to convert them to our belief system. And there'll be a 2 million year old culture who has their own set of beliefs. And
right, exactly. Yeah, one of the astrophysicists was just trying to say, I think it may have been Neil deGrasse Tyson. I can't remember exactly, but he was saying that someone was saying that if they are out there, why have they never really made contact? And he said, did it ever occur to you that we are of no interest to them? They are so far advanced of us that they know that it's like a little baby. We need time to grow. And the baby thinks it knows what it's doing, but it's just now knowing its colors. That's it.
Think of it as we look at chimps, right? Chimps know how to use tools. So they'll use a stick to get something out of the bottle or whatever. Right. But that very fundamental, and I feel like that's how they look at us. Look at those guys down there with their little tools.
So we're a little zoo. That's cute. They're trying to get to other planets.
And they're pooping all over the place and making a mess. Like
they have to eat. Oh, how cute. They're at that part. Remember we used to do that? Yeah. Who's to say? But it's so fun to pontificate about what it could mean.
The ramifications of it are huge. And it makes you look at things through a different lens then, especially when you look at the old carvings and these old things, like you mentioned before, not only in Egypt, but also in the pyramids of South America with the Aztecs and the Mayans. And you have these, take a look at the monoliths that are within South America, and they're amazingly huge. And it seems like the older you go back in history, the larger the blocks that they were able to manipulate and create and build with.
I agree. Yeah. It's again, I'm not an expert of anything, but I totally agree with you. I don't know anything. I barely know how to turn my computer on. Okay. But I've heard other people, it's not unique to me at all. This is not my unique theory, but I've heard different parts of it everywhere. And what I seem to be thinking, and maybe I'm totally wrong, what the heck? I think that it just seems like these ancient cultures, we think of them as dumb, or not dumb, but they were just in their own time with these rudimentary, now we've invented the wheel and just so on and so forth. But I think that they were very advanced, and that those things have passed, that knowledge has passed over time. We don't know how advanced they were. And they had some way of manipulating rocks, like you say, or moving them, stacking them, cutting them with laser precision. And that technology has been lost to us over the years.
Absolutely. Or have you seen in South America, they have some that almost look like they were heated and they're molded.
Right. I mean, like they were poured into a ice tray or muffin thing and baked.
Yes.
It's like, what?
I remember seeing this one picture, and it just, the fold of the super hard type of stone, and how there's no other way than it had to have been molten at the time. I do remember also, because I'm a huge History Channel buff, hearing about technologies where there was some kind of concoction that they could make and apply to stone to make them malleable. I don't know if that's 100% true, but by looking at
how
Greek
else do you
fire.
explain it? Exactly. I was just going to say something like that. I don't know. Volcanoes were more common then. Did they know something? Even the components of a volcano, it seems like I don't think we have complete knowledge of what's going on. I was taught in junior high, but I'm lucky if I know the names of the presidents. So what am I saying?
And I'll refer to something that I forget the name. Like I'm thinking of the Antikythera. What's that mechanism that was like a computer that they found underwater?
Oh, I just saw a thing on that. Yeah, it's fascinating.
The technology that they had was beyond what we get them credit for. And I do believe I'm a big ancient history buff. I think 90% of it is entertainment, but there's still some good points I think that they bring up, which is evidence of a lost history, lost technology, ancient civilization that was pre-flood that seemed to have wiped out the smart people of that time and scattered them. And
the Library of Atlantis, and I can't even think of the name of it.
Constantine's library.
Yeah, you see what I'm going. Yeah. Like what knowledge was collected? I don't know.
Lost.
Yeah.
There was a Greek philosopher. I don't know if it was Plato or he went and visited Egypt, and he said, "How is this that you have this technology? Our history only goes back a couple thousand years or whatever." And the priest laughed at him and said, "Oh, it's because you've lost your history." And so the Egyptian history went back much farther than the rest of the world. And I do believe that, again, the technology that they were using back then, much greater than we have the ability for today. Another my favorite sites, Göbekli Tempe, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to go somewhere similar. There just seemed to be some type of a communication. And even as we go back, one of the ancient civilizations in the throughout the Southwest are the Anasazi.
Right.
And we really don't know anything. It's just one day they all disappeared. We're not finding burial sites of them, but we know from what they built of villages and stuff, we know that there was lots of them. But where did they go? We don't know.
Those are the ones that created the lions, correct? Or no, those are the Nazca lions. But the Anasazi, what are they known for? They're known for something I'm forgetting.
They're mainly through the Southwest. I can't think of, other than just the fact that they were, I can't even say the word Puebloans. I think that's how you would say it. So they're the ancestor, and Anasazi actually means the ancient ones, right? Mm-hmm. And so they think that they lived, I think, probably 200 AD, maybe 1300 AD. And there's all kinds of ruins of the Anasazi, but there is no, at least this is the most famous thing I know about them, is that where there remains their burial, because they were of a culture that, or at least at that time we found other cultures that had started to bury their dead. So that's the sign of a civilization, is they're burying their dead. They're not just dropping them in a pit in a cave or something like that. But even if something natural disaster, we're not finding their bodies scattered or finding a scapula here and a femur here. So yeah, I wonder what kind of, like you were saying, what are they famous for? It's what did they have? What kind of art? What kind of
I had to take a look. Chaco Canyon in Colorado.
Chaco Canyon is
huge trade outpost though as well. And the Anasazi also were traders as well, correct?
Yeah, they were traders. And I think for the most part, they weren't a warring tribe or anything like that. And so I know that we're going to have listeners that probably are much more well-informed than I am. But it's, as far as I know from what I remember and what I learned, is that they were fairly civilized, at least of what we learned from, because of their pottery. And it's like they had a system in place. And if you ever visit like Chaco Canyon in these places and you see their instruments are out, the stone that they would grind corn to get cornmeal to make their bread, to leave in it and stuff. It was just like they just evaporated. There was things in place and things left undone.
Pueblo Bonito is one of the huge ones. That's 800 rooms.
Oh, it's huge. Absolutely. And they're saying that was from the 10th or 11th century. I know that we're not talking 5000 BC, but still. Yeah. Okay, so they lived in, the 1100s or whatever, but why can't we find their remains? What happened to them?
Big part, so I did a little research while we were talking. So I know that their society was based as an agricultural society.
Sounds right, yeah.
And they had what they called the three sisters, corns, bean, and squash, which I love. But they don't have a lot of impact in terms of defacing the land in that aspect.
No.
One of the great mysteries regarding them, they think it's maybe drought, resource depletion. Obviously, the ground's really arid, perhaps warfare with other tribes. But they say that the temperate Pueblo people, such as the Hopi and the Zuni, consider themselves to be the descendants of the Anasazi.
Yeah. That's right. And a lot of them still use the artwork of the pottery and stuff of their ancient ancestors. So that, as far as we know, is that through their DNA, it's still alive today. So that's amazing.
Did you know that Anasazi is Navajo for ancient enemies or ancient ones? Yeah.
I knew it was ancient ones, but I didn't know. That's what's interesting. A friend of mine, I grew up with the Navajo people, and it's an incredibly difficult language to learn for a white guy. It's guttural. Whereas me being a white guy, I learned to talk from the back of my throat. But a lot of the Navajo speak it's a guttural type of sound. And it really takes a good ear to hear the different sounds that they create. That is, in effect, why we basically won World War II, is because their coding technique, the Navajo code talkers, were able to get amazing transcribed messages and pass messages to each other. And the Japanese couldn't figure out what the heck they were saying.
Yeah, it was an unbreakable code. I want to toss this in there just out of respect for the ancestors and the native people that might be listening. The Anasazi, or the Pueblo people today, prefer the term ancestral Puebloans. Puebloans, yes. Ancestral Puebloans.
Yeah, I can't even say that. That's absolutely, I keep referring to the Navajo. That's what they were referred to and referred to themselves when I was a kid. But for the last 20 years or so, they want their word for it, which is Dene.
Oh, okay.
That's what they prefer. Yep, Dene, which is a Navajo word. I think it means people, the people.
I like that. Not just because it's easier to pronounce. It rolls off the tongue, though.
It does.
Something I can pronounce.
Yeah, and none of us want to be called something that we're not. And
no, I like to
a lot of this was, it was anglicized and in a wrong way. So even though it's a step in the right direction, it's not a complete change. But anytime that I think we can right or wrong, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I agree. So let me bring to light one of my state's native peoples. That's the Ho-Chunk Nation. They're also known as the Winnebago. They're an indigenous nation in North America with traditional territories in parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. So they definitely had a good swath of the land around here. One of the most well-known cryptids, not that they're really called cryptids, but one of the most well-known spirits, if you will, that are associated with the Ho-Chunk Nation is the water spirit. And they call it the water panther, or the underwater panther, which I love that. Yeah.
I can visualize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But this creature is a common figure in many of the Native American mythologies around here, not just the Ho-Chunk. So the water spirit's often described as a powerful creature with the body of a feline, often a cougar or a lynx, combined with parts of other animals like the horns of a buffalo, scales of a fish, and sometimes even a long undulating tail. The spirit's usually associated with water bodies, and it's known to cause various water-related disasters, but it also brings benefits. Usually, I find with Native Americans, isn't there always balance? I love that about it.
Yeah, the good with the bad, the yin and the yang.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really appreciate too. So with your cryptids of the Southwest, you have a lot more spirituality and belief system associated with it. The cryptids that we have in Wisconsin, not so much. To give you another one of the ones that we have in Wisconsin, we have the Beast of Bray Road. And wow. So let me tell you this story.
Okay.
One Halloween night in about 1991. So you think long time ago, right?
Yeah, for me, it basically seems like yesterday, but go ahead.
Right. There's a lady called Dorothy Gibson. She found herself driving down the solitary Bray Road, which is a winding path carved through the heart of Elkhorn, Wisconsin. The cold moon barely penetrated the dense, all-encompassing fog that swirled around her car, adding a palpable tension to the desolate surroundings. Suddenly, a jarring thud resonated, and the vehicle lurched as if she collided with an unseen object. The deafening sound echoed, seeping into the eerie silence of the Wisconsin night. She quickly brought the vehicle to a halt. She could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins, her mind's racing. Against her better judgment, she decides to inspect the pursued damage. So she gets out of the car. As she steps onto the gravel road, the icy winds gripping her coat, sending a chill through her spine. She squints, peering into the veil of the darkness that stretched with the weakly glowing headlights of her old vehicle. As we're talking 1991. Suddenly, a pair of luminescent eyes flickered to life in the gloom. Attached to these eyes were a hulking silhouette, partially obscured by the tendrils of mist. A dark, shaggy, fur-cloaked figure, and the glow revealed a snarling snout filled with dangerously glinted teeth. What struck this lady the most was that the creature's imposing size. It was larger than any known canine species in the area. So she stumbles back. She fears for her life. This fear escalates into panic. A low growl reverberates through the quiet, a sound so fearsome it compels her spirit back into the safety of her vehicle. She locks the doors of her 91 car. And as she speeds away, she feels a thud from behind, as if the creature lunged at her departing car. Oh. Glancing in the rearview mirror, of course, she sees the lingering figure of the beast, a sight etched in her mind forever. But this incident was in the local papers, and investigative cryptozoologists gathered numerous similar testimonies from other witnesses in the area. The description was consistent, a werewolf-like creature standing on hind legs. But to date, the cryptid is a prominent figure of local folklore, and the town even commemorates it with the annual Beast of Bray Road Festival.
Absolutely amazing. It is fascinating. I'd never heard that story. And you were saying that a lot of the Native Americans, some of these stories come down from Native Americans. And you were saying in your region, a lot of them don't have that kind of spiritual background. But I think that in general, almost all of these come from the Native Americans. Because if we take Bigfoot and Sasquatch, it had been a tale, if you will, the Native Americans had been telling, even ones that are not even talking to each other. So you have the Navajo, you have the Cherokee, you have way up in the Pacific Northwest and in California where the quote famous film was done in 68 or 69. So you have all these amazing.
Isn't that Robert Patterson?
Patterson. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think that's the name. I should know this. The Patterson Zimler film. Am I saying that right? I don't know. I can't.
Connor, you're the one that does the commercials.
Right. It was two men that had gone horseback backpacking up in the area.
Yep.
And one of them was filming, and they got it's the most famous shot of Bigfoot, of this female, what appears to be a female Bigfoot, striding across this riverbank. And so
they got it wrong. So if I can make a joke here, if I'm getting too off, because I'm going to edit this part out about making the jokes.
Okay.
But this is where I would say something like, it wasn't a chick. It was some big guy with man boobs. Because typically the ladies stay at home with the kids. I would make a joke like that. Would that be
Because-
cool with you? Or do I
right,
have that?
yeah.
Do I have that liberty to have that humor? Because usually I'm so serious and I just want to have fun.
I think it is. I think it's harmless if you say man goes. Everyone knows what the hell that is.
3, 2, 1. There's a reason that they have that messed up there, Connor.
What?
It's not a female. It's actually a oversized gentleman with man boobs and a very hairy chest. I live in the Northwest and I know what they look like. I spot them out my window quite frequently.
I look in the mirror and I see it.
I was going to say, I hope no one shoots me because I could often be mistaken for that myself.
We have the right. We're not meaning any harm with anything we say today or in the future.
No, not at all.
Okay, so
but I don't want to be
one of our
mistaken as a
producers-
cryptid.
Yes. And one of our producers just handed me Patterson Gimlin film. Thank you so much. That's exactly what it was. And you're absolutely right, because I'm a complete idiot. I thought, I just was thinking it's Bigfoot. It's a male.
Right.
And I only learned 3 years ago that I guess as they zoomed in and saw, and I've seen the photo, and you're right. There is definitely something there that we could say, okay, it's a female or just a really oversized male that's out of shape.
You take a look at gorillas, though, and being serious for a second, on their anatomy. If they're swinging through trees, their arms are larger in proportion to their bodies. So Bigfoots are known to be some type of primate, more than likely. And I've seen Finding Bigfoot and some of those shows. There's some beliefs that they might even dwell on the trees or hang from the trees,
That's true. This keeps them hidden, right?
But if they're overdeveloped like that, wouldn't that be one of the muscles that would overdevelop?
Yeah, exactly. It would overdevelop. Or let's say that we don't know anything about him or her. What if something happened and he or she is not as active as they used to be? So that muscle turns to fat just like it would on a human.
Right.
And just like a pectoral muscle of a man, maybe in his 20s and 30s, it was well developed. Here he is in the 60s and he wears really thick shirts to hide it.
I watched that enhanced footage of the Patterson film.
Yes.
And I never thought of that figure as a female, but I don't know.
That's debatable. In my opinion, the whole thing's debatable, but
I don't know, maybe there was that swagger as it walked away and looked back to make sure the boys were looking.
All right. Yeah. Are you checking me out?
Yeah. I'll just keep going.
Right. Yeah. How do you like me now? Do you like the stilettos?
Yeah. I love it.
I think we have to have fun with this stuff because honestly, with what we're talking about, it's like, how the heck am I going to sleep tonight?
Exactly.
Panther swimming. I've worried about Jaws, but now you have to worry about a huge panther that can swim. I know tigers can swim, but I'm picturing something underwater that can just come out of the deep and get you. It lives in the water.
And that's a great segue. So the lake monsters of Wisconsin, do you have them in your area as well?
There is some, not where I grew up, because of course in New Mexico, we don't have that many areas of water. So we didn't really have those stories.
I forgot that. Sorry.
But out throughout the Southwest, there are stories of those type of things. But I think they're more predominant where you guys are, because I know the Great Lakes, of course, there's just endless stories of amazing sightings there of a Nessie type creature. But why don't you share what you remember?
The one that I remember is one that I grew up near, which was Rock Lake. But the one that I'm going to start to tell you about is actually from Lake Michigan. Wisconsin lakes are really known for their clear waters and serene surroundings. They've always had a sense of enchantment for visitors that come here. Beneath the surface of Lake Michigan and Rock Lake, there's stories abound of strange creatures that challenge our understanding of the natural world. So I'll give you an example. In 1967, there was a schooner that was named Lake Serpent that set sail on Lake Michigan, only to mysteriously disappear. The tale of its tragic loss is passed down through the generations, and with it, whispers of a sea monster that lurked in the lake steps. The lake is actually up to almost 1,000 feet deep in certain parts. So, yeah, huge depths.
Yeah.
The discovery of the ship's wreckage in 2018, just recently, resurrected these legends, actually. and painted a chilly picture of the Michigan's monster's possible existence. And I think that came about because there wasn't necessarily a name for it, just the Michigan lake monster that I could find. But we've had so many wrecks on Lake Michigan or the Great Lakes in general. It's because the body of water is so enormous. Most people think of a lake as something you can see usually the other side of. But what they don't realize is that Lake Michigan's the size of a large state, and the depths of it go up to nearly 1,000 feet deep in certain parts. And so, there was a Civil War wreckage evidently that was crossing during the Civil War period, had like billions of gold, or like $1 billion worth of gold bullion, and sank in the waters somewhere. People are still looking for that wreck, obviously, to this day, but it's a rumor. It hasn't been 100% solidified, but yet that's one of the legends that I hear a lot about. But getting on to the other one, Rock Lake is really small near Lake Mills, Wisconsin. And I used to canoe on this lake and fish on this lake, and it was wonderful. In fact, supposedly Rock Lake has a pyramid somewhere in the middle of it. And that has been a urban legend for a long time and on a few TV shows, and haven't found it yet. But there's some rocks that look curiously like an old, perhaps, formation that was man-made a long time ago, but not at really great depths. But over at Rock Lake, the calm surface bellies a tail of a massive serpent-like creature, and this includes recently. So in 2004, local resident Dennis Murphy reported a sight that sent shivers through the community. So while enjoying a quiet afternoon by the lake, Murphy's tranquility was shattered by an unexpected sight. Supposedly, a serpentine creature, approximately 30 to 40 feet long, with the head of a horse, gliding through the water. The creature soon disappeared, leaving behind a wake of swirling waters and an echo of an age-old legend. Because evidently, back in history, this also was another legend where we had a serpent with a horse head reported in tales from the 18th century. So I find that interesting. And these are recent stuff. And then it spreads like wildfire through the community, and it's on the news. And all I have to say is Wisconsin, we're known for beer and cheese. And if we have too much of one, you get serpents in the lake and maybe some guy that hasn't shaved that likes to terrorize us.
These stories are, of course, we have the Loch Ness Monster in every, not to use the term Great Lake, but every Great Lake seems to have a story like this. But as you were talking, I recalled there's several lakes in California. I'm trying to remember the name of the lake, but they had and it wasn't California. I think it was Utah, the Great Salt Lake. There is a crocodilian, is that a word, type of creature that supposedly resides there. And
I don't know if it's a word, but I'll buy it.
I'll buy that for 100, Alex. And here I live in Oklahoma now, and we have a lake that was named by the Native Americans here called Lake Tenkiller. And even though it's not like a Nessie type creature,
that's a hell of a name.
Yeah, it's where you go. I'm gonna go swimming in Tenkiller. It's like only good things can happen there.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, again, I'm sure that's probably someone's last name, so I'm not making fun of them at all. But it's a name that you would not think of. That's going to be the name of the lake, but translated in American or English, that's probably what it comes out to. But for years, there's been what they refer to as the Oklahoma octopus, because Oklahoma is landlocked, so we're not. There's no tributaries that run into Oklahoma bringing salt water. But fishermen over the years have pulled up these freshwater octopi. And yeah, so I didn't even know those existed. So I don't know how much. I know
those existed. I
don't know if that's true. If it is true, how did they get there? Are they freshwater, or are they? It's like just a million questions. But yeah, there's so many mysteries. We're worried about going to Mars and stuff. There's so much we haven't even, what are they saying that the world's ocean, we've only discovered 20% of it? We've only explored 20% of our ocean. So it's just, and that's how long have we been around?
Yeah.
It's just incredible. I was reading the other day, this is off the beaten path, but they were saying gorillas, we've only had those documented since the 1800s. It's, what? We know they existed, of course, before then, but they've only been scientifically classified and seen and documented by modern humans in the 1800s. That just blows my mind. And then these stories like what you're sharing from Wisconsin or whatever, I don't doubt anything anymore. And furthermore, Beau, and this is going to be your fault, I'm not going to sleep tonight. So thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
Well, so I looked up, I could not find, evidently the idea of freshwater octopus are only in cryptozoology. They have not been proven as of yet.
Okay. I hear about them all the time here in Oklahoma. About my uncle knew a cousin who was best friends with their Avon lady who caught a freshwater octopus, or they've seen it, but I haven't seen
say that. So they say that octopus requires salt waters to survive, as they have evolved to rely on the mineral content of the ocean as a critical physiological process. So the salt evidently helps with respiration and waste removal. But that's not to mean that there couldn't be a species that we haven't classified yet.
Absolutely.
And they're such a fascinating, not to interrupt you, but they're such a fascinating creature. I watched something recently that was trying to see if they were actually aliens, because they do have such a unique genetic makeup as well as abilities with their ability to change color or camouflage. And
camouflage, right. And so here in Oklahoma, that's one of the theories, is that there's a lot of red clay. It's a red dirt state. A lot of people say I was born red, I'll die red. So the clay on Lake Tenkiller, if it gets cloudy, you can't see, it's murky. It's not crystal blue waters like you would find in Cozumel or somewhere like that. And so these things could easily blend in with the environment and have not been known about for forever. It's just like, who knows? There's so many mysteries that we have here on Earth. It's just amazing.
True. Being from the north, we don't have anything that will necessarily kill us. We have, I shouldn't say that. We have rattlesnakes.
But
but those are few and far between. Only isolated areas, and at least in Wisconsin, they still inhabit. But the further south, you get a lot more possibilities.
Oh, yeah. And here in Oklahoma, hell, you get a mule, you piss a mule off, you'll get a kick to the head and die that way. So you have to be, if you come out to anywhere in the Southwest, don't walk behind a horse. There's just a lot of rules that you got to live by. But my dad,
I'm thankful. First of all, I'm just thankful I've never done that, because I usually am worried about poop or pee. But now that I know that they can kick you and kill you, yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I've known a few people. That's how they met their end, was they were kicked right in the head by a horse because they startled it. They came up behind it and it didn't know what was there. So that's their reaction, is maybe a snake. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Which is why when you go to the Grand Canyon, they have those mules or donkeys, I guess they're mules, that know maybe they're horses, that know their way down the path, because it's just, they're like the 15th generation of horse to do this. And that's what you do, is you get on a pack mule or a horse. And I've never done it. I would love to, but I couldn't even do that. I would die. About 10 minutes later, can we have a Coke? Yeah. Where's a Circle K? Here we go.
And you always hear about people that die going on that adventure.
And even hiking. Well, they forget, so what, I'm making up the number, but let's say, it's a 4-hour hike. That's so pack enough water. That's to get down there. To turn around, you also need water for 4 hours back. So a lot of them, that's where their math skills may not be really up to date. And
I start thinking about how much water can I carry?
And there's that. Here's the really idea. Go to the top to the gift shop and look over and go, wow, okay, take a picture. buy a few postcards, go to the restroom, and then go on your way to Barstow or wherever you're going to. That's the best way to. But no, seriously, all the jokes aside, Grand Canyon is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen next to the ocean in my life.
Yeah.
And when I explain to people, they go, "Oh, I've seen pictures. It's the Grand Canyon." Unless you're there in person, the Grand Canyon, believe it or not, has a sound. I can't even explain it, man. It's like New York City, not to be negative on it or anything, but New York City has a unique smell. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but it's a smell that's unique to New York. The genetic makeup of the hot dog vendors and the trash outs. I don't know what it is, but it's just the Grand Canyon has a signature. It's just if you go out to Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, and you lay out up on the bluff on top of one of those and just like meditate or just relax. The land has a heartbeat. It's just Shirley MacLaine talked about being grounded and people made fun of her. I don't think she's that far from the truth. There's seems to be things that we are beyond our understanding. I'm not saying that she or anyone necessarily knows everything, but it seems like we all have a little piece of information with us, right?
Yeah. No, you hit that on the head. It's everything. Yeah, I agree. I still got a couple more cryptids you want to go through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is fascinating. Like I said, I sure as hell am not going to sleep tonight. That's not the point.
I think I did the last one. And we left off on Thunderbird for you. What is your...
Let's see. We were talking about Thunderbird. The part of New Mexico I grew up was in the Northwest, the Four Corners area. And there's a very sacred rock called Shiprock. And that's the anglicized name that was given to him by the Spanish explorers. And because it looks like a ship from a distance with sails and that type of thing. Those type of ships, not a Carnival Cruise Line ship. It was a clipper ship, so to speak. And I can't even say, and I would not even try to say the name that the Dene call it, but it basically, the word that they use basically means rock with wings, because it's like it was a volcano one time. And it's just so significant part of their mythology and their history and their spirituality. And it looks like a kind of a colossal bird, basically, that has its wings folded. And in a distance, you can see that. If you close your eyes long enough and squint a little bit, you'll see that. Their belief is that this large bird took their people and brought them from like the frigid northern territories to the Four Corners area where they were supposed to be. And so that rock, you can't even climb on it without permission from the Navajo Nation. It's majestic. And just growing up, I could look out the window and you can basically, because we're so flat out there, there's no real mountains out there. You can see Shiprock for miles. It's just a shadow on the horizon. I think they say with your naked eye, you can see about 25 miles clear. I think it's 1,000 miles, 100 miles. It's just, it's incredible. But anyway, so yeah, exactly. And I've never heard necessarily any of my Dene friends talk about the Thunderbird, but I always think that maybe that is tied in with it, a large bird, and it carried people to that. It's like the way that some of them describe the Thunderbird with wingspan from horizon to horizon, that would be able to carry a large group of people in their mythology or their belief system. Right. Anyway, I just thought it was just a fascinating thing. So if anyone happens for whatever reason to be going through the Four Corners area, you have to see Shiprock. That's, to me, that is like our Mount Rushmore, basically. A little side note, the little highway that ran out by Shiprock for many years, I think it was a State Highway 666. And a lot of the Christians have come up in arms. They wanted that changed because it was a satanic number. In the Navajo belief system, Satan doesn't exist. There is no Satan. And therefore 666 has no sway over them. Yeah. So, and they're basically at that time, maybe other than the occasional tourists, they were the only ones that used that road anyway. So they would have been fine if it didn't even have a name, much less 666. So I think it's funny that everybody spent all this money and time to get together and change the name of the route to something else when in reality, it didn't matter at all. So they still used the road and they didn't put any power. I think whatever you believe in, you put power in. That's what I think.
I agree. That could be another podcast topic. Wasted, useless movements in history.
Yeah. Why are you wasting time with that? Right.
Yeah. I have to talk about the Hodag the Hodag before we get to the end of our podcast. So I might as well bring it up now.
Okay.
And my family is from the Rhinelander area, and in the late 19th century, so that's the late 1800s, for listeners that might not know, in Rhinelander, Wisconsin was home to lumberjacks, traders, and one particularly mischievous resident whose name was Eugene Shepherd. And I love this because this is right up my alley. Shepherd was known for his love for practical jokes, inadvertently birthed a legend that would etch itself into Rhinelander's history, the Hodag. So the story goes, Shepherd began circulating tales of his encounter with an extraordinary beast in the surrounding woods. He described it as a chimera. Am I saying that right? Chimera? Chimera.
Yeah, I've heard different chimera. I've heard different things, but maybe it is chimera.
Chimera of frightening features. Supposedly this had the head of a frog, the face of an elephant, and a dinosaur-like spines that ran down his back, and thick legs ending in a formidable claw. The most distinctive feature was a spear-tipped tail added to its already intimidating aura. The Hodag generated widespread interest, and Shepherd capitalized on this curiosity. You got to remember the time, right? Snake oil and all that stuff was going on at this time too. So he presented a captured Hodag to the Oneida County Fair, a spectacle that drew gasps of awe and fear from the onlookers. It wasn't long before the Hodag was a sensation, cementing itself into the local folklore. Eventually, it was revealed that Shepherd's Hodag was a cleverly constructed hoax. But by then, the legend had already taken a life of its own. The creature became Rhinelander's mascot and is celebrated in a dedicated Hodag festival. So you can find that still today, a prominent sculpture of a Hodag near the Rhinelander area Chamber of Commerce. And that's a testament of its enduring legend. So can you imagine like concocting something that you then reveal to the Oneida Fair? So
by the way.
Yeah, I could not find a picture of what it was like or even a drawing. What they have is a complete creature. I would love to see what the original one looked like.
Yeah, what was the conception of the thing?
Yeah. The head of a frog, the face of an elephant.
What's only a face a mother could love? What do you mean? Minutely. What are you talking about? Just you describing it makes me want to get out of the damn room. Like what?
Yeah.
What is this thing?
And I live in Wisconsin. See, that's why I cherish your stories from your own cultural history and region, because it's so much better than the ones that I've been able to share today.
No, I don't think. I think it's mutual. I think yours are unfamiliar to me, so I love them. And likewise, mine to you probably. We've heard little bits and pieces of each other's backgrounds, but it's interesting to see what the local folklore come up with, whether it's true or not. Yeah, almost at this point, it's irrelevant. It's just, I don't know if there is a Loch Ness Monster or a Bigfoot, but I hope to God there is. I really do.
Me too.
I hope there is a Sasquatch. I hope that if we find it, we finally say, okay, we'll leave it alone. Let it live.
Or create some kind of, because I think it probably migrates. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
that it migrates through the U.S.
It goes where the food is, the animals, the foliage, maybe. I don't know if it eats berries or if it's like the Chupacabra that eats.
Finds a spot to call its own. You don't have a lion pack in the Sierra that's all in one spot. Otherwise, they kill each other because there's competition. Only so many.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe like each of these, because you have the skunk ape, which is down in Florida, that's a Bigfoot. Maybe he just liked that area and found it hospitable and able to live down there. And because of that region and his fur, he just tends to smell more than he would if he was.
That's absolutely true. He's been called Sasquatch, the hairy man. In Arizona, he's known as the Mogollon monster. And every place has unique version of that. It's just, but the smaller things that we're talking about that is unique to your culture, or just as much as is, it's not really unique to Southwest because they're in Lake Michigan area and that stuff is the Thunderbirds. But let's say the skinwalkers are pretty much real classified as the Southwest. So each area has just amazing things that they come about. I think that the local original Native Americans, the ones that were really here first, it's stories that they had to either teach other stuff or it was based on actual encounters with.
Yeah. You had put together something regarding the Bigfoot of the desert, which I found really interesting. The Southwest Sasquatch. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So we all know about the famous one up in Northern California that was photographed and that sort of thing. In New Mexico, again, through the Navajo reservation, we have a version of Sasquatch, or we grew up just calling him Bigfoot. And every time we'd go camping in Colorado, the Rocky Mountains, we would all get the stories as kids about keep your eyes peeled for Bigfoot. He's out here. And in Arizona, the Southwest, they have what in the Mogollon Rim area, they have what they call the Mogollon monster. And he's described similar, like we have always heard about Sasquatch, anywhere from 8 to 9 feet tall and dark hair. It doesn't smell very good. And he usually howls or screams and is extremely reclusive. So to me, all these stories have always seems like they don't want to be found. They use the howls and screams, get away from me, go a warning, like a dog.
So not communication, more of a warning type of deal. Like
to me, that's, again, I'm an actor, so what do I know? But to me, that's what it sounds like. But those reports of Bigfoot specifically up in California, I think those reports go back to the 1800s. The same thing with this one in Arizona, the Mogollon. But
they have, I didn't mean to interrupt, but they have rock paintings of this or this creature that you're talking about, right?
Yep. It's the Tool River Indian tribe. And I know we're in a kind of bizarre area of using terms like Indian. And so I apologize if it offends anybody. Some want Native American, but they just generally have been known as the Tool River Indian tribe. They refer to the Sasquatch as hairy man. And they have this area called Painted Rock. So there's these ancient pictographs are all over. They're in red, black, white, and yellow. And here's what's bizarre about it is that the pictographs show not only a male and a female, but also a kind of a child Bigfoot. So it's like you have a family, a little tribe.
Wow.
And so this little village that they're in painted this ancient prehistoric painted rock. This thing, it might go back to 1,000 years old. I know with a lot of things we're discussing, that doesn't seem like a lot, but 1,000 years is a long time. That's just absolutely amazing that they go back that far, and yet they have those sightings, or that there was something that gave them that indication to draw on to make it not just a human, but a hairy man. Were they primates, or were they some kind of a prehistoric person that we didn't know about or have any idea about? But so, yeah, that's a very fascinating thing. And then we have the Arizona, the Mogollon that we talked about. And to think about throughout the Southwest, but in Arizona specifically, the average high temperature in the summer is 106 degrees. And so you were talking about Bigfoot's probably migrating. With all that hair, I can't imagine a family of them staying in there. So I would think they would migrate to Colorado or the Pacific Northwest, where there's going to be breezes and it's going to be cooler, and you have maybe a summer condo or something. But it's just so unique that they all have them. And I know that they have them where you're at. They talk about Sasquatch.
Yeah. So we had a famous Bigfoot encounter in Wisconsin history in 1976. And that took place in Eagle River. So there's a woman that reported a large ape-like creature. He approached her car on a secluded road, said it was around 7 feet tall with a broad chest, long arms, glowing eyes. The sighting spurred on an influx of similar reports around the area. But we also had one as recent as 2006, which stirred a huge Bigfoot discussion within the state, because there was a resident that reported seeing a tall, hairy figure walking along the edge of her property. She said that the creature was extremely tall, covered in dark hair, and walked on 2 legs like a human. But we don't have a ton of forests in Wisconsin, because back in the day, we locked it all down, but we do still have some. And definitely, I think, if anything, like we were just talking, there's a migration pattern. I do know that there's been some research into that as well, stating that, just like you said, due to the fact that they're so hairy and temperature wise, they tend to migrate so that they're comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame them. We as humans migrate. For years, we've had the blue hairs, as they call them, come from Michigan and stuff and head to Florida in the winter. The northern birds fly south. Snowbirds, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, the grass always looks greener on the other side until you get there.
True. Absolutely. Absolutely. That goes for everything, whether we're talking about cryptids or if we're just talking about where to move for a better job. We all, whatever we are, as far as living creatures go, we have to be where it's comfortable. There's only crazy things like reptiles and lizards and stuff like that that don't really migrate. They just stay right in the heat because they love it. The sunbathers.
I have an idea for our next podcast.
What?
I enjoyed this one. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely terrific. It's just,
we should do one. And like what we were talking, the lost civilization aspect, proof of ancient history or the things that pop out to us, like those megalithic structures and some of the other stuff that we were talking about, even within this podcast. That's a whole road that we could dive down that would be extremely interesting.
Well, I think it'd be fascinating. It's like you were talking about the Anasazi. We're just talking about these monolithic stones like the Sphinx and down in Mexico, the Library of Alexandria, all this stuff that we talked about. That did it exist? The lost city of Atlantis? Did it exist? If so, what did it contain? What is the information that was there? No, that'd be a fascinating podcast. I think most everyone would be interested in talking about that or hearing about that, because I know I am. It's stuff that wasn't talked about in school, but this is what I really want to discuss. We all know that who the president of, or the king of Spain was, but let's talk about Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah. The fun thing about you and I doing this is that we've talked about serious stuff and our personalities match up well enough where I think, especially this episode today, I had a blast with.
I had a blast too.
And if we can do the same thing with something like that lost civilization and hone that down a little bit better, I think that'd be a great show.
I think it would be too. Absolutely. Yeah, because we had an idea of what we're going to talk about with cryptids, but our path was wide. We talked about all kinds of things and even got off the beaten path. And like Lynn, we always do that. We seem to find what our next podcast is by the time we come to the end of the previous podcast.
Funny how that works. Hey, let's round up with this one. Don't hang up. We'll do an ending for this one. Before we do that, any new projects or anything that you've been working on that we can promote?
The only thing is, it's just amazing how many people are coming to learn voiceover. And I'm a full-time voiceover, so I'm not really a teacher or anything, a coach, but I do take on students, and I'm designing a curriculum and working on a project, hopefully that will be out sometime next year, that people can download and maybe learn about voiceover. A lot of them may not have the time to, with family and a job being full-time, they may not have time to attend a class either on Zoom or in person. But at the end of the day, they just want a glass of wine and kiss the kids goodnight and go to bed. But if they had something they could download, just a brief introduction to voiceover, that would be maybe something they'd be interested in. So anyway, that's a project. I'm in the design portion of it right now, but I think that would be cool to help, because every day I get so many emails asking, how can I get into voiceover? And I just think it would be cool to refer them to something that I trust. Whereas there's so many people out there with coaches, I don't know anything about them really. So I can't necessarily recommend them, but I just think it would be a good thing because a lot of people are interested in it. And
I love that idea. I think that's great. And I think you bring a lot to the table, not only with your skill sets and the tools that you have in the toolbox, but the way that you teach, the way that you talk, and the way that you share your story is highly interesting and it is engaging to the listener. And even a teaching setting, I think you would excel, and you do better than anybody that's alive in this day and age, have a lot to offer. All those experiences that we've talked about on the show, things that you've shared, and you have a million more on your toolbox. I'd hope so. I've been very fortunate. If I die tonight, I've lived a full life. For my 53 years, I've had a good life. And
I just can't imagine someone who is struggling to live their dream. All I can say for the people that are listening to this podcast is look at Beau. We all have hard stories of getting from point A to point B, and you haven't had the easiest story to tell. But here you are, the master of your own domain and doing your own podcast, taking care of Beau. And yeah, absolutely. Helping other people that are lost souls. All of us are, get back on the path. That's all we all want is, where's the light? Let me walk towards the light, because in the grand scheme of things, we are just here for the length of the universe or the time of the universe. We're here for not even a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And so we've got to make the most of it. And so I don't want anyone, I would just hate that they're going to be 85 or 90 or 105. And then they look back with regret on one particular part of their life and say, I thought about starting a podcast, or I should have got into voiceover, or what's stopping you? That's why you seek out stuff like this podcast, listen to things that Beau's talking about, or take notes, right? Because you're so easy to talk to. You're like a therapist. I'm telling you stuff that I don't think I'm telling other people.
I'm glad I can bring that up.
What's in this Kool-Aid, Beau? What the hell are you doing?
Don't drink the red Kool-Aid. Sorry, I forgot to tell you. The thing that I get out of this is I know that people have found it helpful and useful and found nuggets out of it because they contact me and they tell me that. And that's the best reward I could have ever gotten out of this.
Absolutely. Last story here before, because you know me, I'll just talk on forever. But when I was in Hollywood, I was a kid, and I wasn't getting a lot of auditions, and a group of kids told me, go see this lady. She's near the Paramount Studios, and she will help you learn to sing and dance, and you'll be a triple threat when you go to audition, and you'll get more auditions. I don't even know why my cartoon guy he's acting weird. Anyway, so I found this lady. We were at 20th Century Fox or Paramount Studios filming, and I couldn't even drive at that time. I was probably about 12. So I found her house. There was no Google Maps back then. There was no internet, but I found her house. I was scared to death, went up and knocked on the door, and she answered. And I told her, I'm an actor, and I heard that you teach things for actors. And how do I do this? How do I learn? And she was an elderly woman. And I just thought, what does this woman know about dancing and singing? But she'd come with all these reviews from people that tell me, you've got to go see her. We were talking, and whatever the price she had said is, I couldn't afford that. And so I apologized for wasting her time and was going to take off. And she said that she would take me on for free, basically. And I said, I can't do that. There's no way. And she kept insisting. And I kept refusing. And finally she got upset and she says, do not get in the way of my blessing. I'm like, what does that mean? I've seen my parents fight with their friends about who's going to pay for dinner that night. And they're fake playing. Oh, come on, let me. But she seemed real passionate about this. So I asked her. And that, out of everything, out of the dancing and singing that I learned from her, which was useful, my big takeaway after all these years from her was, her blessing was, she said, what we put out, we get back threefold. And it's in many religions and beliefs that formula comes about. Mm-hmm. And she said, so I'm going to receive a lot of blessings by helping you out. So do not get in the way of my blessing.
I love it.
In a way, it was selfish because she knows she's going to get blessed, but at the same time, it's like a nudge and a wink that I'm a down and out actor, but she was helping me get on the acting train and get more auditions and that thing. So I think, like what you're saying with your podcast, you put it out there and you get the energy back. That's why you and I do what we do. Yeah. And that's the only reason we're doing the podcast, is maybe it'll help brighten someone's day by listening to these stories and things that we share.
I agree. And like-minded people, I have met you and become good friends with you. I've met some other amazing people. And the level that we play on, I think, is not as easy to find in our local neighborhoods, at least not in mine.
Would we have met at a local bar?
No. And the fact that I've created this network of now what I consider my friends. And when we do this, it's not work. We're enjoying our time together. We're talking about stuff that we find interesting. And hopefully listeners do too. Sure. Yeah. I thank you, because I think it's people like you that have made my world a brighter place. And so I want to give credit where credit's due.
Likewise, man. I wouldn't be here if I didn't enjoy it. And like I said, you're like the male Barbara Walters. The next thing you're going to ask me is if I could be any type of tree, and then I'm going to cry. And so we're halfway there. I'm not going to go to bed tonight. So there's that. You did get that part of me.
I appreciate you. So what are you available next? We're looking to mid-August, late August.
Brennan, can you thank you, sir. Let's see. The first Friday, I don't know if Fridays or Thursdays are good for you, but I have a Thursday on August 10th. And then after that, my next opportunity is August 24th, 23rd or 24th or 25th.
Let's do the 10th. That we can go from there.
Okay. Very cool. So
5 o'clock
Central?
Yeah, that works for you. Does that seem like a good time?
Yeah, I panicked today because I thought, oh my God, maybe he meant 5 o'clock Eastern. And so I should have been on at 4. So I logged on and then my calendar came on and says,
let me see
it's coming up at 5 o'clock.
This has been Digital Voices with Beau Tiffany, exploring deep stories from real-life guests with real-life experiences, providing insight to our listeners with every story. Stay up to date on future podcasts by bookmarking Digital Voices with Beau Tiffany.podbean.com and follow Beau on social media by searching Digital Voices with Beau Tiffany. Have an idea for a future story? Send your idea to acrmadison@gmail.com. Until next time, grab life by the horns and keep inspiring others.